I am waiting for specific information.
Que nous devions subir matin.
Uganda is now a free country.
Hey everyone, welcome to Afro-Lens here at Face Africa. My name is Gentil Niwe. On today's episode, we'll be looking at the resurgence of coup d'etats in Africa. Why so many military coups in Africa today? If you have not yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, please allow me to remind you to go ahead and do so to be the first one to know whenever I upload a new video. Here is a clear and a detailed analysis of this story. Why are we witnessing a rise in coup d'etats in Africa today? Well, allow me to dive a little bit deep into the history of Africa for us to get a clear picture of what we are seeing today. Africa started witnessing coup d'etats immediately after the struggles against colonialism. When most African countries had gained their independence, we started witnessing coup d'etats. There are two reasons for this. One, the former colonial masters wanted to have an influence in the politics of their former colonies. The French wanted to have a say in Senegal, in Algeria, call it Algeria, in Mali, Burkina Faso, in Guinea-Bissau, and all their former colonies. The French wanted to have a say, wanted to remotely influence the politics of these countries. So the former colonial masters were responsible for the first phases of coup d'etats in Africa. Secondly, we also look at the influence of the Cold War, the war that was between the USA and the Soviet Union. Both blocs, the USA and the Soviet Union, wanted to have allies from Africa. And in their war, they started also influencing coup d'etats in Africa. So all the coup d'etats that took place in Africa in 1960s, 1970s, and 1980s can be blamed on the outsiders, the former colonial masters, and the influence of the Cold War. In the 1990s, we witnessed the end of the Cold War, with USA as the victor of the war, and the Soviet Union lost the war. At the time, many African countries embraced the Western democracy, and we started seeing elections here and there in Africa. However, that was not the end to coup d'etats in Africa. We kept on witnessing coup d'etats, if not civil wars, in Africa. I'll talk about the last 4 coup d'etats that have taken place in Africa. We begin with the coup d'etat in Sudan. In the year 2019, President Omar al-Bashir of Sudan was overthrown by his own military men. Of course, they overthrew him after weeks of demonstrations or protests by civilians who are not happy by the leadership of President Omar al-Bashir. He was overthrown. That was the first military coup d'etat in 2019. In 2020, we also witnessed another coup d'etat in Mali. In August 2020, Colonel Assimi Goïta staged a coup against his president, President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta. Of course, Mali was going through a lot of political instabilities, months of protests. People were demanding reforms from the government of President Boubacar Keïta. So when the president could not deliver anymore, the military men led by Colonel Assimi Goïta took over, staged the coup d'etat. However, ECOWAS was first to act, had to put pressure on the government of Mali, Bamako, and Colonel Assimi Goïta gave in a little bit and accepted to be the vice president and appointed a civilian to take over, of course, to prepare for elections. However, few months later, Colonel Assimi Goïta staged another coup d'etat, and he became the president again. and he's still the president of Mali. ECOWAS has been trying to put his leadership under pressure, but he is not surrendering, at least not soon. If you can cross over to Guinea-Conakry, in September last year, 2021, Colonel Doumbouya also staged a coup d'etat against the government of President Alpha Condé. You remember Alpha Condé was the first democratically elected president of Guinea-Conakry. He was elected into office in 2010. He served his first term and his second term. But in 2019, he wanted a third term. He defiled the country's constitution. Of course, he used a referendum and got himself a third term in office. But this move made him very unpopular. People didn't love him anymore. And when he lost his popularity, when he lost the ground, the crowds, the people, Doumbouya was very smart. He was like, this is the time to strike. And he immediately staged a coup d'etat against his government and overthrew him. That's just last year in September. So as we are still dealing with these three coups d'etats, one in Sudan, two coups d'etats in Mali, another coup d'etat in Guinea-Conakry, this week, on Monday, we witnessed another coup d'etat in Burkina Faso. The government of President Kabore was disposed. The constitution of the country was dissolved and a new military rule was imposed on the country or was established in Burkina Faso. What's still happening in Africa? President Roch Kabore was elected came into office in 2015. But this leader has been very weak, honestly speaking. His government had failed to at least provide the basic services to the people of Burkina Faso. We saw an increase in military attacks against the government troops that were not well equipped, poorly fed. The logistics of the national army or military was very poor in Burkina Faso. We have been losing dozens of soldiers in the country as they are fighting a battle that the government was not willing to fund or to win. So this made the president unpopular. It's on record. Burkina Faso has more than 1.5 million internally displaced people. They have more than 1.5 million people who are displaced within Burkina Faso. That's how insecure the country is. I was reading one report from UN that over 3 million people in Burkina Faso need humanitarian assistance. So to be honest, the government of President Kabore had failed. So these military men, they said, we can't take it anymore. You're not supporting our war against the IS, Islamic State. We are losing our friends, our comrades every day in the battlefield. You're just in the State House doing a lot of nothing. So we saw Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Damiba overthrowing the government of President Kabore in Burkina Faso. So after the militarymen discovered that the government of President Kabore was very unpopular and was not willing to deliver, the militarymen, of course led by Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Damiba, staged a coup d'etat on Monday this week. Well, it's very interesting. It's sad, but of course interesting, because Africans, we have to be very serious with our politics. More than 4 coups d'etats in a space of less than 5 years in Africa. And these are the more recent ones. But Africa has witnessed dozens and dozens of coups d'etats. Why are we seeing an increase in the number of coups d'etats today? Here is my thought. Here is what I think is happening in Africa. A lot of political analysts have said what they think. But here is the take of Afro-Lens on this story. First and foremost, we shouldn't focus on the occurrence of coups d'etats themselves. The focus of Africans should be the cause of these coups d'etats. Everyone is talking against these military men who are taking over power, who are overthrowing governments in their countries. But we must understand the reason as to why these men and women in uniform, they're deciding to take over. They're deciding to overthrow civilian governments and establish military governments in their countries. That should be our starting point. One thing I've seen in common in all these coups d'etats is that these military men in uniform, they always strike when the civilian governments are unpopular. When the civilian governments have failed to deliver proper governance, military men come in and say, we're going to try and see if we can provide the right governance of our country. So it's the unpopularity of the civilian governments that always make these military juntas think of overthrowing these governments. The unpopularity of the civilians to lead or govern their countries. Trust me, if the same thing would happen in these more democratic nations, call them the Western countries, the civilians who are in parliament, who are in the executive, they fail to deliver, trust me, the military will come and take over. No matter how democratic the country would be. So the unpopularity of the civilian governments in these countries is the first reason for military coups d'etats in these countries. I know many people don't want to talk about this. I don't know why. But the truth must be said. When the government becomes unpopular, when the government fails to deliver, when the government fails to provide the basic needs to the people, and the people raise against the government, they go on the streets in protest against the government, the next thing we should expect is a military coup. As simple as that. If you can look at what was happening in Sudan, President Omar al-Bashir had failed to deliver. The country's economy was very bad. People couldn't even afford buying bread. They couldn't afford to even have something on the table. We saw women on the streets of Khartoum, young men all over Sudan saying, enough is enough. President Omar al-Bashir, go back home. The military protected the government's interests. They started beating people, tear gassing people. But when the military discovered that this government we are fighting for is not worth fighting for, they staged a coup d'etat against President Omar al-Bashir. It's the same thing that happened in Mali. When Colonel Assimi Goïta realized that people don't want President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, after months of street protests against the government of President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, after years of political instability in the country, Colonel Assimi Goïta said, it's the time to strike. He organized his few friends and they staged the coup d'etat. Twice. They staged a coup d'etat twice in Mali. And he's still in control of the country today, up to date. If you go to Guinea-Conakry, Colin Doumbouya staged a coup d'etat after President Alpha Condé had defiled the country's constitution. As I told you, President Alpha Condé was the first democratically elected president in Guinea-Conakry. He was loved by the people. But when his second term came to an end, he was like, I want to have a third term. He used the referendum, he got a third term, and that made him very unpopular. Very unpopular. People didn't like him anymore. With the increase of his unpopularity, Colonel Doumbouya was like, this is the time to strike. He staged a coup d'etat against President Alpha Condé. Let's go to Burkina Faso now. Burkina Faso is almost a failed state. The government of President Kabore had totally failed to deliver. People were tired, were extremely tired of this president. They are regretting as to why even they voted for him in the first place. I saw a clip, people saying this man's government was not doing anything useful to the people of Burkina Faso. So the military men, they had to come in to intervene. That's why whenever people stage coup d'etats in Africa, we see young men and women running on the streets celebrating them. Just because the civilian governments are unpopular. As simple as that. We have not seen people stoning cars, military cars. No, we have not seen them doing it. People were welcoming these men in uniform. Very happy to see a coup d'etat in Burkina Faso. That's how unpopular the government of President Roch Kabore were in Burkina Faso. Do you believe that the government of President Kabore couldn't even provide food to the soldiers who are fighting against the rebels in the country? Can you believe that? That they were fighting without any logistics. That's how unpopular his government was. So when the military men come and say, no, we can't allow this unpopular, unrealistic leaders anymore, and dispose him, lucky enough, and I'm glad none of these leaders have been assassinated by these military men. They just make sure they remove them from power, from office, and they take over. I don't see a reason as to why all Africans should start blaming these military men. I don't see any single reason for that. We should understand the cause for these military coup d'etats. And the main cause is the failure of civilian governments to deliver proper leadership, call it proper governance. That's the main reason or the primary cause of these military coup d'etats in Africa. Of course, we shouldn't be happy for any kind of unconstitutional government changes in Africa. No, not at all. But we should understand the cause of these changes and find a medicine to this cause. And the cause here is the failure of the civilian governments to deliver. That's the main cause. I have not seen where the government is delivering, people are happy, there are no protests, and a coup d'etat taking place. No. In all these last coup d'etats that have happened in Africa, they all began by the people of these countries protesting against the governments. People going on the streets saying enough is enough. And the military men read between the lines and said it's the time to strike. And they are really striking. And if civilian governments do not wake up from their sleep and start delivering, we're going to witness more and more coup d'etats in Africa. I'm telling you. No African president should feel safe. Not at all. You should only feel safe when your government is delivering. when the government is providing proper governance, you can feel safe. But if you're not doing so, trust me, soon your military men will come for you. So in summary, the unpopularity of civilian governments is the main cause of coup d'etats in Africa. And if Africa is to stop coup d'etats, we must go back on the drawing board and make sure the civilian governments deliver. Make sure these governments, what you call constitutional governments, the elected presidents, deliver. Provide proper leadership and good governance to their countries. Trust me, that will be the end of coup d'etats. No military man will leave his barracks to go on the street and say, we are taking over the government. People will not accept them. They will be very unpopular that they will be forced to go back to their barracks. But right now, whenever they stage a coup d'etat, we see people celebrating on the streets. People happy. Women dancing, singing, welcoming their heroes. Another reason for the increase of coup d'etats in Africa is, of course, lack of proper and strong intergovernmental organizations on the continent. The African Union is a nut club. It's just a club where our leaders meet and make fine speeches, eat and drink, and go back home and do nothing. In the African Union, the leaders will never say what they mean. They don't say what they mean. And they will never mean what they say in the African Union. They don't do that. So the African Union is a nut club. No action, talk club. For example, we have been seeing these coup d'etats. What has the African Union been doing about it? Nothing. Threatening to impose sanctions, threatening to do ABCD, but it's doing a lot of nothing. Of course, we have other regional blocs like ECOWAS. Trust me, ECOWAS has been trying. ECOWAS has been trying. Of course, not enough. But ECOWAS has been trying to promote political hygiene in the western part of the continent. ECOWAS has been trying and is still trying. They have been imposing sanctions, even suspending some of the members when they do some things that they don't believe in as the bloc, but it has not been that enough to stop coup d'etats from happening in Africa. I think there are two things we must do here. First and foremost, our intergovernmental organizations being led by the African Union must stop being toothless dogs that only bark and do a lot of nothing and start doing something. The African Union should start doing something. We should start meaning what we say and say what we mean. We should start walking the talk. If we say, as the African Union, we're going to impose sanctions, let us do it. Do it fully. Impose the sanctions. Let us hold these people accountable. Let us do it as the African Union. ECOWAS should act more strong and united. We saw when the president of Gambia, Yahya Jammeh, wanted to come up with some sort of indiscipline. ECOWAS was like, come on friend, we will not tolerate this. ECOWAS made a move and President Adama Barrow was put into power. ECOWAS made a move in this case. Why can't ECOWAS do the same in the case of Guinea-Conakry or in the case of Mali? I understand some leaders in ECOWAS, they don't act in the spirit of regionalism, but in their selfish interests, of course. All political actors are rational actors. What comes first to their mind is their selfish interests. But our regional powers regional intergovernmental organizations. The African Union should stop being nightclubs and become action clubs. If we do that, trust me, we shall see some discipline in the African politics. Another thing that I think is very important is the African Union to understand that the West has nothing good in store for Africa. Have you thought about this one true fact? That these three West African countries that have witnessed coup d'etats, all of them are former colonies of France. And all of them actually, to be precise, Mali and Burkina Faso, have French troops in their countries. Of course, in Mali, they made sure that they suspended them to leave the country. Even now in Burkina Faso, we have the French troops there, doing a lot of nothing useful. A lot of nothing. ECOWAS wanted to impose tough sanctions on Mali, but when it went to seek assistance from the UN Security Council, China and Russia had to veto. That means even if they would impose sanctions, China and Russia will still have to deal with Mali. And ECOWAS couldn't do anything about that. So that shows what? What does this show us as Africans? That we should start acting as Africans. If I may ask a simple question, when did USA come to the African Union and ask them, we are planning to do ABCD, should we do it, yes or not? No. They sit down and do whatever they want to do. When they came to Libya, when NATO came to Libya, they didn't even ask Africans what we thought about Libya. They just sent in troops, came to Libya, spoiled the country, messed up with everything in Libya. Now, Africa is facing a challenge of fixing things in Libya. So the African Union should start working for the people of Africa and should stop, if possible, immediately stop seeking permissions and instructions from the West. Because that's one of the challenges. When our regional actors want to act, they always go to UN to seek for permission. And UN always block them in one way or the other. I've just given you the example of ECOWAS that was trying to impose sanctions on Mali, but China and Russia, who are permanent members of the UN Security Council, had to veto that move. And ECOWAS had nothing left to do. To be very clear, one, we should understand the cause of military coup d'etats. And the number one cause is the failure of civilians to deliver. Civilian governments have failed to deliver, have failed to provide proper governance of their countries. So we must make sure we elect leaders who are capable. Yes, Africans should start voting for leaders who are capable. When you put him in the State House and make him the commander-in-chief of all armed forces in your country, you should make sure this man or woman is capable, is going to deliver. Because if he fails to deliver, you should be sure your military men will take over. Secondly, if we are to stand against these coup d'etats as Africa, let us do it wholeheartedly. Let us mean what we say. If we say we are imposing sanctions on all military leaders that have staged coup d'etats, let us do it and mean business in doing it. If we say we're going to suspend these countries from the African Union or even from ECOWAS, let us do it and mean business. Let us suspend them for real. Those are the only two things that will bring political sanity, if not political hygiene, in Africa. If we don't act accordingly, trust me, the coup d'etat in Burkina Faso is not the last one. We shall still witness more coup d'etats in Africa. But if we do the right things, we elect good leaders, civilian governments that are capable of delivering proper governance, no coup d'etats. And once coup d'etats occur, the African Union and other regional actors mean business, they act accordingly. Trust me, we shall have some sense of political display in the African politics. That is the take of Afro-Lens on this story. That's all we had for you today here at Afro-Lens. I hope you've enjoyed and of course learned something. If you have not subscribed to our YouTube channel, allow me to remind you to do so. Of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel to be the first one to know whenever I upload a new video. My name is Gentil Niwe. Till we meet again in our coming episodes, allow me to say bye-bye for now.